All right, thanks for joining, guys. My name's Deb. I'm the founder of Find Calm here. We try to take you with conversations around creating calm in your life. Today we have Freddie, and he is going to be talking to us about finding calm with podcasts. And what I wanted to ask you guys before I bring it over to Freddie, I had a question. What brought you to this conversation today? Think about maybe ideas around podcasts and how that might create anxiety. If you have a specific thing or a specific example that you can share with us later, just think about that in the back of your mind. Maybe write those little notes down. And then I'm going to have Freddie kind of talk a little bit about podcasting. So, Freddie, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you do?
Okay, so yeah. Hey guys, I know most of the guys live on the call know me, but for those recorded and everything. So my name is Freddie Saliba. So I'm kind of a bit of a digital nomad, and I started podcasting about a year ago now. And that's when I first started recording, but I've been listening for quite a few years, and it's been just one of those things that I've been able to help express myself and really kind of find calm in myself and who I am and what I'm about, which I really love. It's been something that has been quite amazing. For people who don't know what podcasting is, it's kind of like radio on demand in a sense, that you can find, whether it's through Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasting. There's quite a few other ones, and you can find a range of different things, but pretty much anyone can make a podcast. And now there's even hosting that's completely free, so it's not even a huge cost, which is quite amazing if you ever want to make a podcast. But it can really reach to everyone, and really quite an interesting kind of phenomena that's come up in the last while here. So yeah, it's kind of going off what Deb was asking. To start, I wanted to kind of see how involved are you guys in podcasts? Do you all listen to podcasts, or what sort of podcasts have you listened to? Stephanie, do you want to start?
Yeah. I listened to, do you know Tim Ferriss?
That was actually the first one I listened to. Maria actually introduced it to me many years ago. So
it's fun. Yeah,
he's so amazing.
So I listen to him a lot, and I like it. He's just like informational, and he has a lot of good speakers, a lot of good points. So listen to him. Listen to
Have you listened to Joe Rogan?
Sorry?
Have you listened to Joe Rogan?
No, not yet.
So, do you know what I find interesting about podcasts? Joe Rogan has more viewers than any media channel, than CNN, than any other media channel. He's the most listened to thing out there. How amazing is that?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you got also location India as well, you said there, and some of those things.
Yeah. So I'm subscribed to like a bunch of podcasts, but it's just hard to find time to like listen to all of them. Like choose which ones you want to listen to. Yeah.
I thought when we went on the live, I think it was 2 days ago, Deb and I were talking about that aspect, which I think we'll touch a little bit on and see if we can brainstorm some ways to help with that, especially in this kind of time. I feel like most of the people who listen at a specific time of not too sure now, but
yeah, like usually on like commutes and
exactly. Yeah, that's kind of the prime time. And then when we're all stuck at home at the moment, it gets a bit harder, but yeah. How about yourself, Maria? You said, have you got any other podcasts you listen to?
I listen to, it sort of depends. Like my husband has a podcast I sometimes listen to, but it's more like a social thing. And then your one I sometimes listen to, and I sometimes like someone will link me something and they'll say, listen to this one podcast. Like just recently, there's one by Sam Harris and he talks a lot about meditation and stuff. And sometimes I listen to that, or sometimes I listen to Joe Rogan. There's one, Jocko Willink does one, but I don't really have one that I like adore and always listen to. It's more like, oh, I want to listen about this one specific topic and this person happens to talk on that one topic, so I'll listen to that one episode on their podcast and then never go back to that podcast. You know what I mean? I'm more like that about it.
And I think that's okay too. Some people get very nervous and anxious around the idea of like committing to one podcast and I don't have the time, I'm not up to date. And honestly, it does not matter. Take the time, listen whenever it's ready for you. As a podcaster, like one, you barely even, you just see numbers. You can't really tell if one person's listening or not. And so it's okay. Like we know that that's what's going to happen. People are going to listen to episodes that interest them. I get some listeners going, oh, that person or that topic isn't really my jam, I'm just going to skip it. Like apologizing, that's like, it's absolutely fine. Don't ever feel that you have to. And doing that sort of way, I've done that a lot as well, and completely fine. It's really up to however you want to listen to podcasts as well. So, yeah. How about yourself, Deb? What do you listen to?
So, I discovered podcasts like not too long ago, actually. It was in like 2017. And I had been searching for health and wellness podcasts because I had wanted to get healthy and create some habits around, eating better foods and like understanding, when to eat and what the best times are and what foods to eat. I was kind of like, I didn't know anything. I was just like, I know I need to like lose weight, but I was like, how do I do that? And I really found a podcast that was around mindset that I really liked. It's called Primal Potential. And she talks a lot about mindset and how your thoughts really, especially if you identify as somebody who's like an emotional eater or something like that, and how your thoughts really can drive your actions. But it's also taking action. It's like, if you could set a goal, or you could say, I want to create a habit, but you also have to take the steps to make that happen. Amazing. And so she kind of was like talked about the limitations and the blocks that we create ourselves, and the conversation that we have with ourselves that holds us back from like having the life that we really want to have. I forget whose quote it is, but it's something like, why do you stay in a cage when the door is wide open? Like, and that, I forget, I'm kind of paraphrasing it and probably like killing the quote, but basically like, how do you, why are you creating these limitations for yourself when you can totally do anything that you want to do? Nobody is stopping you but you. Because it's really easy to say, and I've said a lot of things, I can't eat healthy because I work in a stressful office environment and people literally brought me food to my desk all the time. So I had those excuses, but like, I started listening to that podcast, and then I thought, oh, well, what else can I listen to that is interesting? I want to learn about travel. So then I found Jason's podcast, and then that's how I found Location Indie, and so I started like gradually learning those things. Now I have a lot of topics of podcasts that I listen to. Some are specifically business focused, and being an entrepreneur. And then other ones are about creating the mindset. Other ones are about resetting in a certain way, utilizing essential oils specifically, or utilizing different types of food. So I have a lot of different areas, like between personal self-development and also business and career development. So I have a lot of podcasts, and I think my anxiety sometimes tends to be is I just don't have time. Like you guys are saying, I was primarily commuting to work and listening to podcasts when I had a 40-minute commute. But then when I left my corporate job, actually when I moved to where I live now, it was only 5 minutes. So I actually lost my commute like a year ago. And so then I was incorporating more activities where I was hiking or doing something around my house, like cleaning my house. And I was listening to the podcast as I was doing these activities. And so I was still like able to like keep up with my subscriptions. But now because I have so many other ones, and I'm not doing as much actively outside, it's been really hard to like keep up. And so I've been trying to find strategies around eliminating, the ones that like aren't going to benefit me right now. And like, maybe I come back to those. I've been trying to work through that. But then I also kind of have this like, well, what if I miss something that's like really important and then I missed out on it? Just like, but I just can't listen to so much content. And there's parts of me that are like, I want to create.
That's it. Yeah. I think a little bit like what I was saying. It's like okay to miss stuff. It's always going to be there as well. Is the thing about podcasting. As much I know, it just means there's going to be more content to catch up on. But you don't. It's one thing to remember. You don't have to listen to every episode either. Sometimes trying to, get the little bits that, as you say, benefit you, and it's not necessarily meaning you have to cut down a whole podcast. Maybe it's just certain episodes, depending on the podcast. Maybe it's an option, but yeah.
What do you do? Like, how do you consume or create? How do you structure your podcast?
So I think like you all, it's been a bit down on the listening front since like I used to do a lot. I mean, I've been working online for the past year or so the commute side of things hasn't been as big. Used to be, when I'm going to the gym or when I'm traveling around like overseas, like on the buses and things like that is when probably the primary time I would listen. But, there was also, I started listening to Spanish ones because I wanted to keep my Spanish improving. So then I ended up losing some of, that my regular ones. So I was always trying to find what fits in with your life right now, I guess. And I know I'll come back to them, and I'm not stressed too much when I lose track now. There was a time where I was getting so up to date, and then I just had to let it go because it just was not fitting in my life at that time. And I know like probably in a month or two I'll get back into it. And I know, for me, I have to go, it's okay. Just, So how about yourself, Heather? Do you listen to many podcasts?
So I actually don't listen to too many podcasts, and the first time I ever listened to a podcast was last February. Not the February we just had, the one before that. So like, a little over a year ago, because I was I'd planned this road trip through Mexico and I knew zero Spanish. And so my great idea was to listen to podcasts while driving in Mexico. So it's like I'd be like going out to eat, and I'd be like skipping to the podcast about like ordering like food from a restaurant and like listening to that right before I'd walk in, so I could hopefully, get through the situation, which by the way is not exactly how I want to travel, but it is what it is. And so that was kind of my first experience. And then I didn't really start listening again until I was in the Location Indie community. And so, I started listening to, Trav and Jason's podcast, Location Indie podcast. And of course, as you know, I listen to yours pretty regularly, getting caught up on that. So yeah, so that's kind of,
amazing.
that's my experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example. Like the learning of a language is such a unique thing that some people probably go, oh, you can learn that through a podcast. There's just so many things in the podcasting world that's out there, like any kind of content you can think of. How did you find did you find it helpful with the learning of Spanish?
I did, and especially because, you know, I could hear it. Now my all my language experience up to that point had been in French, so I had a really hard time like kind of figuring out how things were supposed to be spelled. You know, like I was just trying to, because I couldn't see it on paper, so I was just trying to pick it up by ear. Yeah, and I was like, what?
That's an interesting thing. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that in the language learning as well, but yeah, very cool. Yeah. So I know Steph was saying that she was kind of finding a little bit trouble when to listen, Deb, a little bit myself. Are you finding it all right with when to listen and when that side of things?
Well, I guess now I'm usually listening whenever I'm driving. So sometimes, you know, I have an appointment that's like an hour away, so I'll load up, you know, download some podcasts so I can listen on the drive. And I assume I'll be catching up on quite a few on my my drive to San Diego in about a month. Because usually I download.
How long is that drive?
I think it's 34 hours.
Wow, so you get plenty of podcasting in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I usually
in between.
Yeah, I usually download a bunch of audiobooks, but you know, podcast.
I definitely feel that kind of audiobooks kind of come in the same realm of when to listen to for myself. Like for myself, when doing hikes, like Deb was saying, there's a big time when I listen to podcasts. Or audiobooks, depending on how I feel. Like for example, with books, if I like listening to audio when they're those kind of self-help, motivational, the same sort of things in the podcasts, because you can just listen on the road myself. So yeah, like I love kind of mixing it up in between those sort of things, and then for sure. Do you have any trouble with finding time to listen, Maria?
I do. I usually only ever do it driving because I just don't even think to put it on at other times, and I really should, because I do like a lot of cooking and I do other things that I could technically have the podcast on, but I don't even think of it until later, and then I'm like, oh, I should have had something on, but I didn't. I just didn't. So it's usually just driving, but I do drive a little bit. Like I drive to and fro things a little bit, so I end up getting through stuff driving. But it is slower, obviously, now because we're all driving less with COVID-19. And I sort of alternate between that and audiobooks. Audiobooks for me go in the same, I guess, category in my brain as podcasts. So I'll have like a list of books I want to listen to. Yeah, and then a list of podcast episodes I want to listen to. And some podcast episodes go for 3 hours. That's like almost as much as an audiobook anyway.
Yeah.
So I kind of go between.
That's the thing. You can get podcast episodes as short as 5 minutes up to 3+ hours, which is absolutely crazy. And and the thing is, some people when they listen prefer to listen to that whole thing at one time, or not listen to multiple, so they'd write that perfect length. I personally just put one on, and when it finishes, or when I stop driving or whatever the activity is, stop and I come back to it.
I do that too.
But for sure. But I guess I had a couple ideas for people if you want. Like you're saying, maybe cooking can be a nice idea to have it in the background. you know, if you're, as we were saying, exercising, whether it's probably not yoga, but, you know, if you're going out for a walk, a run, a hike, going to the gym. I personally don't do it at the gym because I get in the mental gym mode. It's a different sort of thing for myself, but I know for some people love that. As we said, in the car is probably the number one thing that everyone listens to podcasts in.
I guess like there's a trigger, and I think a trigger is important because when I get in the car, I remember to put the podcast on because I know that that's what I do when I'm in the car. But at other times, I don't have that trigger, so I just don't even think of it. So then I totally forget. Yeah, that's a hard part as well.
Is there any way that you think it would help you to remember, or you'd like to do it then?
I have no idea. Maybe I really don't know. Do you have any ideas? Like, because I'll just not do it. I'll just forget, and then like the next day I'll be like, oh, when I was cooking, I should have had something on. But what would make me remember at the time that is relevant, which is when I'm about to start?
I guess the other thing is having the proper setup. Like, how do you even listen in your living room? Do you just be, because the thing is when you're in your car, you have it, you know, your phone automatically connected, you know. Yeah, so like, whereas like, you know, if people like my mum and dad would listen to the radio because it's right there, you know, podcast is an extra step for them that they probably don't think of. And just putting a loudspeaker off your phone may not be the easiest. Unless you have a little system is the thing. Does anyone have
you think it's too hard, I can't be bothered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a system that they can use when they're when they're using it in the house, or?
I was just posting.
Go on. Yeah.
I was just posting in the chat, but I'll say it too. As you were talking, I was thinking about like you're talking about triggers of like how to remember. You could do notifications on your phone at a certain time if you always cook a meal or do a certain task at a certain time that's consistent, which might not be the case, but if you could do that around the time that you usually cook or something, then you could set a notification on your phone that reminds you, hey, play Tim Ferriss's podcast. You could put a post-it note visually, like in your space, whether it's like on your refrigerator or a cupboard, where you see, or a cookbook or wherever, like on your stove.
I like that.
Yeah.
Maria, were you going to say something else around those?
No, I was just going to say I'll try the post-it note thing. That's a really good idea. I think that'll really help me. That was all.
Okay. The other thing I was saying about a dock is if you have a phone dock or your charger for your phone, you could move that into a different room than where it is now. So that way, when
that's a good idea.
Put your phone on the dock, it's already charging there, and then you'll see your phone, and then it will remind you, like, oh, I should listen to a podcast, and you can automatically play that. So those would be my suggestions.
That's a good idea.
Consistency and setting up to be easy.
Does anyone else have setups where they can listen to music or kind of podcasts in the house? No. That's all. No, not sure.
Well, I have a headset that I use every day. And I charge it next to my phone charger. I have a dock for my phone charger, so it sits there and charges overnight. And I incorporate listening to my meditation app in the morning, and so it's part of my morning routine to get the phone and the headset and sit on my couch after I journal. I read a little bit of a passage in a book, and then I journal, and then after that is when I do my meditation, and so then I have my headset there. And then after that, I'm either going for a run or going on the bike, and then I already have the headset, and it's already like part of my morning routine to like listen to a podcast. So they kind of like it's called like habit stacking, where you're stacking other habits to it.
Exactly.
So if you know that you want to start, incorporating a habit, then you can just build it onto something else. That's typically how I find success in like being consistent around habits.
Yeah, for sure. I think like just habit stacking, making it as easy as possible, because you don't want to go into an effort of doing it either. It's like setting something up every time, or if you have your headphones, but the headphones are just inconvenient while you're cooking or whatever. Making it easy, giving you those reminders, and having go with the habit stacking is a great idea as well. So the other side I wanted to talk about, we've kind of either obviously got, if you want to be either on a podcast or making your own podcast, is an amazing side to it, as well as the listening. Has anyone ever thought about having a podcast or ever wanted to be on a podcast? No? There's a couple. I know Deb I've had on my podcast. How did you feel coming on that one?
So it was good, and you gave a lot of tips in an email that I read, and saw some suggestions about like audio and quiet space, and like having some things in mind. So I think that as a interviewee, like that helped me to kind of get set up, and I wasn't feeling like super anxious about it because I had a little bit of information going into it. So I think that was helpful. I was still nervous about just talking about it, the things that I was talking about, because it's still part of my life, and it's like scary to share scary things and stuff like that. So but I think at the same time, it's one of those scary things that I have to get past. In another call we were having, somebody was talking about doing videos, and she was saying about how she's afraid of putting that out in the world. And was that you? Who was that? I don't remember who that was now. Maria was talking about that. Anyway, she was talking about being fearful of like going out and sharing this information, but then it's like something that you just have to like, say ask the question, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? This is something I want to do, and all of these other questions around that. But as you were talking about like having a podcast, I come from a journalism background. I love interviewing people, and I love talking. So
you would do great, Deb.
I would love to have, and I'm thinking now that I'm finished with the Find Calm Here launch, and we're kind of like moving into review and analyze mode with the community, I'm thinking about ideas and ways to do a podcast for Find Calm Here. So I'm going to keep strategizing that, but that would be something I'd be interested in. I'd like have challenges around how you find speakers, how you structure the questions. Do you limit it time wise? Do you those come.
Exactly. What I was going to say, well, at the end of the call, but put that in now. If yourself, Deb, or anyone is interested in doing a podcast, feel free to get on a call and have a chat. Any questions? Because I've had my first one, Curious Emu, which I kind of just jumped straight into, and now I'm just about to launch the second one, Borderless Impact, which we've set a date for the end of July. Oh gosh, that's very soon. It's really interesting. There's obviously a lot of steps, especially when you're starting something new. Just such a big thing. So if anyone wants to talk about just everything you need, like I'll get on a call with anyone. But there's some of the things you brought up, Deb, completely understand. Like, you've got, how long can it be? Like we were saying, that can be 5-minute episodes, half an hour, 45, an hour and a half. Does it matter to the audience? Maybe. Like, what do they want to hear? Is it more interview setup or, solo show? It can be so many different things, and it's really totally up to you. But the biggest thing I think with podcasting, if you're ever going to look into it, is all about consistency, especially when you're starting out. Like if you go, I'm going to release one episode every week, you've got to do that, because that's your listeners. They want to expect that each week an episode's coming out. Don't want to go, oh, yeah, 3 weeks later, like, oh, there's still no new episode, you know. It's a bit of that becomes professionalism, and that side of thing is probably the biggest one. But then beyond that, it doesn't really, like, it's the content, you know, and then obviously you got the editing and all this sort of side that you can figure out whether you do yourself or get someone else to do. But yeah, it can be a bit of a fun, crazy thing to do. But if anyone is thinking about it, I think the first step is trying to see if you can get on a podcast, and see if you like being on the receiving end of an interview. Because that's honestly how I first got into podcasting as well, like as a podcaster. Maria's husband, Zach, as Maria said, has a podcast. And when I came back from Sweden, he pretty much said, hey, like, you've done this stuff, you've grown so much, I want to get you on my podcast. Like, let's do it now. I was like, okay, sure. Like Deborah was saying, super nervous. I didn't get the piece of paper saying, hey, there's all this stuff. We just got there. I just had a couple beers in me, thank goodness. You know, but, you know, once I did that, it was so amazing. I think going back to the kind of Find Calm, it was like, I felt so relieved and happy to be able to share my story and, you know, get that out there. This thing that we all hold so dearly to us, it makes us so vulnerable. And, you know, but it's so rewarding, even if it's just being an interviewee, that podcasts can do quite a lot for people. So this is like, for example, my podcast is about sharing people's stories. So it's amazing to see when my guests come on and I'm able to share their story, you can just, how much they value the space to be able to do that as well is quite incredible. And that's what podcasts can do for anyone. So I would encourage anyone, listen, get involved in any way they want. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you, Maria, you've been on a couple podcasts, I know. You've been on mine, your husband's.
I really like what you just said. That was really cool, what it does for you and what it does for other people. That's really cool. Yeah, I've been on Freddie's one, and I've been on my husband's one, and actually my husband and I have a little fun one together that we do Russian language on. And it's just a bit of fun, so we just do it whenever we like. We don't do the consistency, but we should, but that's okay.
So, yeah.
You know, you do what you can.
Yeah, the consistency is with you really want to build it, you know what I mean? Obviously you can just do whatever for fun as well.
The funny thing, you can just do it just for fun, just to express a side of you that doesn't get maybe expressed in a different way. Which is what we're doing with this Russian language one. Like, I'm originally Russian and my husband's trying to learn Russian a little bit. And he said one day, if we do a little podcast together, it'll give us a reason to talk about Russian language together. And it's started a lot of conversations that we wouldn't have otherwise had, and we would have ignored that side a lot more without it. So it is just a bit of fun. So that's really cool in a way as well. So you can use podcasts in a weird way like that as well. And I'm thinking I might one day start another one, because it just becomes a little habit, doesn't it? You relate to that. You just sort of go, oh, that was so much fun. And originally when I was first on yours, I was really nervous too, and I was like, what am I going to say? I'm going to sound so stupid. But then I listened over it and I was like, look, it's not the best thing I've ever heard in my life, but it's not that bad, you know. It's okay. I'm not that bad, you know. You sort of feel so shy originally, but then you go, I think I did okay.
We're always like most judgmental of ourselves.
Yeah,
the amount of times, like my guests would be like, "Oh, you don't have to use it." Like, I said, I'm like, I don't know if anyone would be interested in my story. And you're like, "Are you kidding? It was so good. It was amazing. And then when I went on and did the Ally, I felt people like, oh, I mumbled, went on forever. I went on the Ally member of the month thing, and I was like, I felt exactly the same. I came off at the end and I was like, oh, I felt like I just waffled on and don't know if it was great. And people were like, no, it was incredible. I was like, oh, okay, now I know how my guests feel. Like, it's normal for us. I think it's a bit of a vulnerability when we're just so open about it to ourselves.
I love hearing that.
So you need to take that into consideration as well when you do that. It's okay, and it's so rewarding and so beneficial for you and your self-development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to share your story a little bit and share what you're doing. Yeah.
Exactly. Have you, so Deb or Maria, are you ever looking to maybe get on more podcasts?
Maybe. I'm open to it, but I'm not sure. What about you, Deb? Deb, I think you need to. You're going to be so amazing. I can just see it now.
Aw, you're so sweet.
I can see it. Deb's got that, I don't know, communication skill or something that is needed to interview people that I think you'd do so well.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely when I was a journalist, I got put through the ringer with my editor about questions. And so now I ask lots of questions, almost to the point of annoyance to some people, I think, because I'm just so inquisitive and curious about. I was at my friend's house today and she was just talking about her farm and I was like 16 questions deep. So I could have had a podcast about like farm life or something.
It's crazy. Just get a recorder out and
yeah, you should have actually taped it. That's how Fred started Curious Emu, isn't it, Fred? You were like, I'm having all these amazing conversations. I wish I had recorded them. Do you remember?
That was my initial reason why I got into the podcasting, and then
cool.
Felt like you have these amazing conversations, and I wish people could listen to them as well.
Yeah,
why not?
I think that's the best thing about podcasts is you get to peek in on conversations that you otherwise wouldn't have been privy to listen to. I mean, I know some people. Like Heath Armstrong has a podcast where he interviews people, but he has a beginning of his podcast is much more direct from him to the listener, but then there's an interview with it. So he has a combination of that
amazing
talk plus interview. But I think it's really interesting because you're right. Like you can't hear these kinds of conversations if it's with two people, or even if it's one person and they're speaking to you about something that they've worked through, that they've found success in, or they're teaching you or training you on something. You wouldn't have access to them in another, unless you paid them as a coach or something like that. So I feel like it gives you the opportunity to learn on a low barrier of entry. It's not like you don't have to set up a call with them. You don't have to get on their calendar. All of those things are eliminated because you just download and listen to their podcast.
Yeah.
So I like that about it. And I think I liked what Maria said about hers is that it's fun, because I think for me right now, taking on another thing that's work is not going to work for me. I'm going to be dreading it. I'm going to be like, oh, I have to put a podcast out every week. And how am I going to do that?
The thing is, you can still do once a month or,
right.
do
I think
5 and then leave it.
Create the structure around it being something I'm going to be able to enjoy, and it's not going to feel so stressful to me. I obviously want to create calm in my life and not stress.
Exactly.
And eliminate what I don't need. So so that would be, I really liked that comment, but I think I still need to kind of workshop around what exactly the content would be, how long, all that stuff.
You would have to streamline or make it easy for yourself, the actual editing and getting it out process, because it could be very hard and complicated, but how can you simplify it and make it easy? And I think Fred's got probably some insight into that as well. How can you make it the easiest possible? Like maybe it is just once a month to interview one of your partners, and then do the least amount of editing and make it a conversation style so that people don't expect it to be super sharp. So that makes it easier for you to do the editing because you don't have to make it super sharp. Like, yeah. What about you, Fred? Have you got some ideas that Deb could make it a little bit easier for herself, not so overwhelming?
Well, I definitely feel, I mean, I think the editing can be the hardest part, especially if you don't want to pay for someone. It can take the most amount of time. But it can be as simple as you want it to be on that end. But yeah, like if you can mainstream it, for example, if you wanted to just do one interview, a long interview, you could put in parts as well. I've seen people do, part 1, part 2, part 3. You could have one interview that you just release once a week. A part, each part of it could end up being 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
I like that idea a lot.
It's another way. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways that you can do it without having it overwhelmed, spreading that content out, even reusing it. I was talking with one of my friends who was doing webinars, and she was looking at turning just the webinar just into a podcast, where there's have a bit of an interview part of it, and just taking the video out, turning it into a podcast where you might not even have to do extra work as well. Is another sense, another option as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it to mainstream it.
Where you make a podcast, you videotape it, and then you make it into a video or a YouTube video that you then have.
So that's what we're actually looking at with our new podcast, where we're looking at doing shorter episodes, but the interviews are kind of just going along. So we're going to be cutting it up a bit, but then probably looking at putting the videos on YouTube. So then you've got another platform for it as well, which is quite cool. There's many ways of doing that as well.
Either two ways. I could interview a partner before we had a live event, like 15 minutes beforehand, and then use that as a podcast. Or I could just pull clips of a conversation from the virtual event, and 15 minutes from the whole hour is what we would put on the podcast.
And maybe you can, if you wanted to have it as an interview part, you could have an aspect of it that you specifically interview maybe at the start, and then you just cut that section out. So it's not even doing extra work. It's more just the editing part, which wouldn't be too crazy. And then, it's pretty cool that you can repurpose. Is an amazing part.
Right, exactly. So, figure out what the least amount of work and using this content in various ways.
And putting it, like you were talking about before, it's about, trying to figure out how you can reach the most amount of people. And this is the thing about podcasting. It's just another platform to find audience members. Some people try and get into podcasting thinking, they're going to make lots of money. If that's why you're getting into it, probably not the best for the money. It'll take maybe 3 years, they say, of consistent work to get the audience enough to maybe get sponsorships or this or that. Do it. You have to do it for the fun to start, for the enjoyment. And then, down the track, maybe you'll make money, but it's one of those things that it's more about getting the audience in and getting those potential customers, really. So remember, as we were saying, Maria and Deb, you brought up, it has to be fun. Otherwise, what's the point? Also, your audience will know if you're not enjoying it,
Right.
So,
we got 10 more minutes left. If anybody has a question, you guys can raise your hand or unmute yourself. But I wanted to ask Freddie if you could give us some quick tips or ways that you, as a listener, because most of us are primary listeners,
absolutely,
as a listener, that we can help to simplify or create calm.
So I think part of it, if you're trying to finding calm through listening, make sure, I think if you've got a podcast you like, subscribe. If you're going out and make sure you've downloaded the episode or have it ready for you so that you don't have to think about it either. You don't want to be getting there, oh, where am I up to? Or, you know, I'm out of cell reception, that sort of thing. Get it downloaded.
Yeah, that really helps.
Yeah, then kind of like Deb was saying, try and think of what will benefit you in your life right now. Kind of put it into categories, whether it's stuff for exercise or health, like maybe a meditation or self-help kind of motivation or whatever it is, education, travel, and figure out if you've got too many in your life, just narrow it down to what you need or want right in this moment, and then let the rest go for the time. Don't stress. Those will be probably the big ones to start, I think, for some tips. Is there any other questions anyone had in regards to? No?
Maybe I'll ask Freddie, what do you listen to right now?
Like, what do I listen to?
Are you listening to me right now?
Well, I've been kind of going through like Travis's Extra Pack of Peanuts, Location Indie, but recently I've been going through a non-for-profit podcast because my new podcast we're looking at becoming a non-for-profit, but it's quite a cool one. It took me a while to, I was trying all these different ones to try and find one that suits, but just really one that just kind of talked about the idea of it, which was quite fun, and then pop between some motivational sort of stuff to keep me excited about life and I guess a bit distracted from everything that's going on, when you look at the mainstream radio and news. So it can be quite good in that sense. Yeah, those are probably my main ones at the moment. But I definitely, as the next couple of months, I'm changing my life around, trying to figure out where I can put more podcasting in my life as well, for sure. So, but yeah.
I'm just going through my list now and removing ones. Yours is still there, it's staying there. But removing the ones, you made the cut. Removing the ones though that I'm just not needing anymore. Like this marketing your business, that was really great for me like a month ago. Is
exactly
irrelevant right now. So that's getting deleted. This one I found, Tim Ringgold was a speaker on the Camp Indie event, but he has a podcast that incorporates music and it's calming music.
Oh,
very cool. I just found that was really helpful to me. I was having some stress and anxiety the other day and I put his on as I was like driving and it incorporated music. And it wasn't like he spoke a little bit, but it was like more like
Yeah, okay.
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
I just went ahead and followed Tim Ringgold as well.
Very good.
Tim Ringgold.
Am I back now?
Yep, you're here.
Yep, you're back.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, so that's what I was going to say about if you have the opportunity right now to go on your list and eliminate the ones that you say, oh, this isn't going to be helpful for me. Because you just know that it's just not the time in your life that you need it. I would do that.
Exactly.
Eliminate, and then you know which ones to focus on. I would even say, if you didn't want to subscribe to them, then like you can subscribe later. Like maybe you go to one and you just listen to one podcast because like if you're looking for new ones, for example, I found that like I would just listen to 1 or 2 episodes before I would subscribe. So that way I knew if I definitely wanted it to be in my podcast feed.
Yeah.
Because I literally have like 20 podcasts right now up in here. Like,
yeah.
There's a lot.
And if you're looking for a podcast, try and look for those kind of keywords or the themes that you're looking for. And know that, you might listen to one episode, half an episode, and go, that's not for me. I know that the way I found Extra Pack of Peanuts actually was I was looking about how to start podcasts. And there was someone else who that was his theme, and then he had Travis on. So then I was like, I like this guy, so I followed the guest along. So I don't think I ever listened to that guy again. Like maybe I listened to 2 episodes of him. I don't ever remember who it was. So yeah, there's interesting ways you get along to find a podcast you might like. So don't feel
and you
have to subscribe or
if you change your mind, you just unsubscribe. That's okay as well.
Yeah, but you don't have to subscribe either. Just until you know that you want it in your feed every time, or you still want to know about it. So
the one thing I would mention too is I found so much that these podcasters are very willing to chat with you. So if you if you email them, they tend to reply back to you. It might not be like the next day, but eventually a lot of these people respond back. So let's say you have a question that you're like, you haven't heard the answer on, and you've looked on the show notes and you can't seem to find like a specific topic or something. You could reply back to, if you get their email notifications, then you can reply back in the email and say, hey, I've been trying to find this topic. You mentioned that you talked about it. What episode? Because I'm really enjoying your podcast. And then then you have a direct connection to this person, and then it becomes a lot more connected, and you're more willing and remember more to like listen to the podcasts, even if you're not driving or something. You're like, I want to listen to that.
Coming from a podcast off that note is, if you ever really like a podcaster or podcast and you want to reach out but you're feeling nervous, don't, because they will absolutely love it. I feel that podcasting is one of those ones where people don't contact them as much. You know, you might have all these lists, but
I didn't know this.
It's quite interesting because you feel like, oh yeah, people will message you and be like, I don't know who's listening. And anytime someone does message me, even like Heather just saying, oh, you said something different. I was like, oh, like you're listening to my podcast. Like that in itself is just so nice to hear. Like even if it's a question or this, reach out. It means a lot to them, I know. Because it's one of those platforms that it's not as common to, I think, just because we're listening instead of, at our fingertips. And they tend to respond back sooner. And they're real people like you and me. You just listen to them more, and then you start, putting them on pedestals, like I know I did with, Travis and Jason, because you didn't see their faces. So you just put them up higher. So
Great conversation. Great call. I really love all the conversations. Dave, have you guys all taken something away that you can kind of start to practice, either eliminating some podcasts or maybe incorporating ones that are going to be helpful for you to support you where you're at?
Yeah, I just thought one last thing. I think you said before maybe you would have a tip on how to get on a podcast if you want to be a guest. Could you maybe just very quickly give a tip on that?
Absolutely. So I think if you want to, it's a bit like I was saying about the reaching out, just message. If you find a theme that suits you and you think you'd be a good guest for it, reach out. Let them know exactly your background, why you'd be good. Often, depending on the thing they say, especially if they're a bigger podcast, maybe give them some answers to questions, links to places that they can find information on you. But just, as I said before, just don't be afraid to reach out, because often, especially the smaller ones, they're more than willing to get on and have someone on. And that, like Deb was saying, part of the hardest part is finding guests, that's what they worry about. And if someone comes up and they're so interested, that's amazing. Exactly. But have a kind of little thing ready for you to send out, saying like introduction, who you are, why you'd be good for it, and somewhere that they can find more information out, really. And then, go for it. So it's a lot of fun.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Thank
you. I think too, if you're as like speak to the fact that you've been listening to that person's podcast, or you're really engaged, and like
exactly
even to the point of noting a favorite episode, then they're going to really pay attention. They're going to be like, oh,
that's
you
a very good point.
Yeah. And I know you're an avid listener. You're not just somebody who wants to have a platform. So I feel like that
yeah, that's a really good point.
To customize it to that specific podcast and their audience. And if you can show that, I feel like if you could show that you have something that their audience would be interested in, like Freddie's saying, there's just no doubt that they would be interested in having you as a guest and getting you on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys are all in the Find Calm Here community, so I'll just mention, if you do have any podcasts you want to share, you can drop them into the Find Calm Here community. You could put it like on the event link or just anywhere in there. If you guys did want to share any of those resources. Maria, if you could share us yours, that would be amazing. And Freddie,
yeah, I'd love to listen.
Yours in there just in case anybody else is interested in listening to yours. It's not already a subscriber. So share those resources in the community. We'll connect again in the community, and then I'll see you guys hopefully on the next Find Calm Here, which is Find Calm with Energy, next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So cool.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys. Bye, Freddie. Bye, Maria.
Bye.
Good day, guys. Evening, night, day, wherever it is.